let's begin with your pregnancy journey, if we could, Julie. I know for medical reasons, you discovered, even though you very much wanted to carry a baby, that you couldn't. I know that you decided IVF treatment and using a surrogate was your best bet because of some medical issues that you had. So, can you tell us a little bit about that journey? About, I know you obviously were disappointed because ideally you wanted to carry your baby, and sort of finding out that in fact you needed to have a surrogate and to have IVF.
Absolutely. Well, and Katie, first of all, just thank you so much for having us this evening. We really think that ours is only one of many stories, but it does certainly hit close to home for us. Our journey really started. We were excited about starting a family due to my husband being a cancer survivor and other things. We needed to do IVF to start with. And we started thinking, okay, here we go, round one. And it was discovered that I needed to have a surgery to repair what looked like some damage. And then that surgery was followed by 6 rounds of IVF, back to back, 2 additional surgeries, medication that put me into menopause, and 2 failed transfers where we tried to bring a child that we so desperately want into the world. And so it was sort of a medical necessity on multiple fronts. And I think the challenge that I didn't even understand going into IVF, like we didn't even understand, is that everything takes so long because we're dealing with the human body and the miracle of science, but it's not quick. It's not instantaneous. There's so many peaks and valleys, and you feel like you kind of get through one milestone and then there's another one placed right in front of you. And so at this point, this just feels like another huge mountain that's yet another thing out of our control as we just want to have a baby.
And I know that you found a surrogate. You discovered, and the IVF worked. You implanted an embryo was implanted as a result of your IVF treatments. And tragically, well, you tell what happened, Julie, when and Lynn.
Yeah. Well, first of all, we met the surrogate and we became very close to her and her husband. They were both amazing, both very driven by Christian values and wanted to wanted to help a family be created. And so they were just extremely loving couple. Got to know them very, very well. And then to have that happen where it was an ectopic pregnancy and she had to have surgery, emergency surgery, because it was detrimental to her health as well. To have to go through that was just extremely emotional. We had already been on such a high from, we were 6 weeks along, we thought, and we were buying baby clothes, and we were getting ready, and had planned our whole lives around that. And then that tragically happened, and so then we had to move on, and then so it was just more and more time, and then right when we were getting ready to start the process over, the ruling came down.
You
And
found another, I understand, Lynn and Julie, you found another surrogate.
Mhm.
You had a match with another surrogate, and then so you were excited about the possibility of trying again, and then the Alabama ruling came down. What was your reaction when you heard what the state Supreme Court had said and the chilling effect it had on IVF clinics all over the state?
I think we were in shock. We initially started our journey and made embryos in California, and we had asked, is this something we should be concerned about with Alabama, from multiple experts, legal, medical, and otherwise? And we were told no. And we literally matched with our new surrogate Friday morning, and then the ruling came down the same day. And I grew up in Alabama. We love Alabama. We love living here. We've lived many places. And it felt like a betrayal of our state when we were trying to bring another proud Alabamian. And to have that happen and dash that next round of excitement and hope, it was just devastating. And we've spoken to so many through our church and through friends of friends and those that we've been along this journey with, other families that are going through this. And the thing that just resonates from everyone is that all of us just want to have a healthy baby. And this is our only way. We didn't, wake up one day and say, "Hey, we're going to try this." Like that's not the way IVF works. It's painful and expensive and time consuming, and you pour your heart and your soul into it. Like this wasn't our first choice, and yet it's our only choice.
Well, I'm curious what you all make of the ruling. The Alabama State Supreme Court ruled that embryos created during in vitro fertilization should be legally treated as children. Now, this stemmed from a wrongful death case
Right.
involving two couples who sued after their frozen embryos were accidentally destroyed. What do you think of the legality of this and the morality of this? I'm sure this is something that you all have thought about since you heard
Yeah.
about this ruling.
I think that whenever Justice Parker came down with his opinion, I think that if it would have come across as this is the way that the law is written, so I'm interpreting the law very strictly, and with the thought that maybe the law needs to be changed. But he didn't come out that way. He came out with a very theocratic tone that was, even for Christian people, it was very off-putting. And it made it sound like people like us were almost criminal for what we were doing, when it's quite the opposite.
And I guess because there are frozen embryos, right, that are stored for couples like you, that saying that they are the equivalent of children changes people's ability to go through the IVF process at all, and really left doctors and I think people who work at IVF clinics in a quandary, right, Lynn? I
Yeah.
mean, is that sort of they thought, well, we can't store embryos because we can't be responsible for embryos if they're considered
Right.
the equivalent of children, right?
Yeah, and we feel so badly for our doctors at UAB and for how, they got into this as a career because they wanted to help families and they wanted to help people like us create families. And so this has put them in jeopardy. And I think that, it was great that A.G. Marshall came out and said that he would not criminally prosecute, but that still doesn't protect them from any type of civil liability. So they still don't have the comfort level of being able to move forward. So we're still sort of frozen in time, literally.
I'm curious when you said the ruling felt very theocratic.
Mhm.
It was actually had very strong religious undertones, to say the least, maybe overtones is a better word. And I'm curious to hear more about your interpretation of how the Supreme Court was making this ruling. It certainly didn't feel like the separation of church and state, did it?
No, it did not.
It felt very moralistic, and that not only are we not honoring the separation of church and state, but we are judging and condemning a group of people that are trying to actually do the thing that you say you're supporting. I think that's like the tricky mind bending part of this, is that if we're going to say embryos are children, right now we cannot give life to our children. We cannot transfer them. We cannot help them come into the world. And so and that we're wrong in one way, but not in the other way, is very hurtful. And I think hurtful to the doctors that are dedicating their life to this, and it just did not feel, as Lynn said, like I'm interpreting the law, and we are a country that stands by our laws, and that is what the role of the judiciary is. But that can be changed. That can be interpreted. It felt like something else entirely, like a combination.
Like everything these days, I think this ruling has political ramifications.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, former President Trump basically disagrees with this ruling. And also, I know that because I think it's politically very difficult and alienating for a lot of Republicans, and especially since abortion and reproductive rights has been a very galvanizing issue for Democrats. I don't want to make this a political issue, but I do think it's interesting that Alabama lawmakers, meanwhile, are considering legislation that would basically protect in vitro fertilization. Tell us about that and what you're hearing.
Well, there was a very important meeting today, and there is legislation before the Republican caucus, and we're hoping to see that move forward with a supermajority in Alabama. If it does, it could pass very quickly. The language is such that an embryo that is outside of the utero would not be considered a human until that it is implanted in utero. So that would still allow people to have interpretations around abortion, where that goes later.
Mm-hmm.
But it would address this particular time of families trying to bring a baby into the world. And they are saying that we still need to marshal support for that. It is not a done deal. And it looks like that there's sort of an expiration date on it where it would need to be revised because it would end.
It would self-repeal.
It would self-repeal.
In 2025, even if it passed.
Mm.
So, there is a Democratic bill that's also been put forward by Daniels.
Yeah.
But that one probably doesn't have as much support as the Republican one, considering that it is a supermajority. So we at least have some cautious optimism that if the Republican side of the House puts it forth, that it will pass.
Why do you think they're doing that? Do you think they're concerned about the political ramifications?
I don't think that anybody in the United States anticipated the way that Justice Parker and the rest of the Supreme Court came down as harshly, and I don't think that they thought through the ramifications of what they were about to do. And once that was realized, I think it was a little bit of shock and awe for everyone involved. And I think that they felt like they needed to scramble to fix this very quickly.
In fact, I believe Florida legislation that was going to do the same thing has now been put on hold, given the reaction to this ruling in the state of Alabama. Is that right?
Yeah, that's what we
Yes.
just read. Yeah.
I know that someone asked, one of my followers asked if your embryos could be transferred to another state. You did initially transfer them from California to Alabama when you started on this process or in this on this journey. Is it possible that you could do that and get treatment in another state?
At this point, no. The clinics are shutting, but there are two issues. One, the clinics are concerned about liability, and the legal landscape of transferring out. And so they're saying that we could transfer to another clinic in Alabama, which is a very gray zone, or we have to wait for additional legislation. The other thing is that there are professional transporters that will take the embryos to various different places. And those organizations are working through their liability and their legal concerns. And so they are pretty quickly all withdrawing from agreeing to take embryos outside of Alabama to other state clinics. So,
Go ahead.
And then
I'm sorry.
there are other challenges too. Other other facilities are sort of booked up, so to speak. You
Right.
know, if you tried to switch doctors or switch fertility clinics or switch to a different state, there's no guarantee that they're going to have the cryo space for storage, and there's no guarantee that those doctors are going to accept new patients. There's no guarantee that they could do it in any timely manner. So once again, it just pushes timelines, and we feel like we've already spent so much time, and we can't really afford much more, honestly.
I'm sure it's taken a huge financial and emotional toll. Someone asked if you could speak with one of the judges who made the ruling. What would you like them to know?
It's a great question.
I would just like them to know that the reason why we're doing IVF is to bring a life into this world. And so any ideology that looks at this differently, I think, is misguided.
And your doctors again are saying what? Just hold on and wait until perhaps the state legislature protects your right to use
Well,
your own genetic material, your embryos, and to be implanted in a surrogate that you have now found.
well, honestly, they're waiting on the ability to protect themselves as well.
As they need to.
As they need
I
to,
mean,
yeah. Yeah, they,
What are they most afraid of, Lynn?
I think civil and criminal liability, malpractice lawsuits, they've got to make sure that, they're not putting themselves in jeopardy as an organization.
And one of the things that has been expressed is that even though our Attorney General, Steve Marshall, has come out and said he does not intend to prosecute providers or families, that is not binding. And so an institution that is as large, that is also state funded and driven as our fertility clinic, the University of Alabama at Birmingham, they have to consider the longevity of their program. And so if they are embroiled in lawsuits, if they make a misstep at this stage, then that could hurt the future chances of them being able to provide such care. So I think it's a wise given the landscape, but they're concerned about their providers, their institution, and they've expressed concern
For us,
for
yeah.
us
Yeah.
that if we were to go and take our genetic material, as you said, and something were to happen, or even it worked out, we could be held criminally and civilly liable at this point. It's just very unclear, and so they're also concerned about their patients.
In closing, I'm curious if you all have met with other IVF families, IVF couples, and if you are together trying to strategize, whether it means lobbying your state officials or doing something as a group. I don't know if you can do a class action lawsuit. I'm not a lawyer. I should probably know that. But are you all trying to galvanize the community? Because many babies are born this way. I think 2% of all babies are born through IVF, I understand. And that's a lot of children, and a lot of couples, as you said, go through really excruciating treatments in order to be able to do this. I have friends who have done it. So tell me about kind of your conversation with other patients. Why are you
I was
laughing,
just going
Lynn?
Well, because it's sort of ironic, because our church actually put together a support group for people going through IVF that were stuck in this situation. And so the irony of that is, of course, because of the way that the ruling came down, but it's our church who's being supportive throughout the whole process. And so, yes, we did meet Sunday night with other people who are, in this process with us.
And we all are strategizing as well as offering emotional support to the extent we can. I think that the question right now is whether we can transfer in state and if there are any clinics that would accept transfers as we wait this out, we've also had a huge outpouring of support, again, much from our church community, of people, who can I call? What legislator? We called our legislators. How can we help? And I think that letting the Alabama legislators know right now that Alabamians, citizens of this country, we all care about enabling human life. And for people who can only have a family this way, to not block that. And that message is so important for them to hear. And we're very heartened by how many are supporting that and are working diligently day and night, as we know, crafting language that can allow this to quickly move forward.
Well, the ruling does seem very extreme. And I think the backlash is, something that judicial systems everywhere and judges are probably paying attention to. Please keep us posted on your progress and your journey. And why did you want to talk to me about this today?
I think it's important to make sure that the message is being heard. So, one, we're appreciative that you made this the topic tonight. We feel like the message is important and that hopefully it will resonate with people who are listening and that the law will change.
And I would add to that, we're both very avid consumers, perhaps a bit too much sometimes, of news and current affairs. And I know that as much as I try to open my heart, there's a point that I'm processing it as information. It's happening to someone else. And there may be things I can do, but a lot of things I don't feel like I have the ability to take action on that are in the news. And there's sort of this, like, that's happening across the world. That's happening in another state. That's happening in Washington. And we wanted to do whatever small part we could to put a human face behind this, to let people know that there's a couple that would, like, cryingly buy one baby item
Mhm.
every time that we would get a piece of good news. And we had to restrict ourselves like that because there have been so many things that didn't work. And so, we have a matching pair of pajamas and a matching pair, for a little baby we might have. And I know that's silly. And Lynn told me not to show it on here. But I think that humanizes and it puts a face to what countless families are going through and are concerned about. And so we just wanted to do our part to share that however we could.
Well, we really appreciate it, Julie and Lynn, and it's great to meet you both. And as I said, please keep us posted on what happens, and good luck to both of you. I have a lot of thoughts, but I'll keep them to myself for now. But I wish you so much luck, and I'm glad that you have the support of your family and friends to lean on.
Well, thank you so much
Thank you
for making space for this.